Rockets fans, welcome to the Rockets Launch Pod, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets. Oh! Sports Talk 790. Rockets, Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Rockets Launch Pod starts now.
Welcome aboard.
DuBose here, Paulo, Alves there. Welcome in to another episode of the Rockets Launch Pod presented by Clutch Fans. It's the final week of August, so these are definitely the dog days of summer and certainly of the NBA calendar. The schedule came out about 10 days ago, but training camp is still almost a month away, so there's not a whole lot of breaking news this time of year, and certainly not with the Rockets who did their offseason business early. With that said, it is a time that because of that absence of breaking news, we can try some more creative things, and that's what we've been doing this month. Our last episode was a draft of assets featuring the two of us along with Dave Hardesty of Clutch Fans and Varun Shankar, Rockets beat writer for the Houston Chronicle. If there's anyone out there that hasn't listened to that yet, please hit up our archives or go to the Clutch Fans YouTube channel and listen to it or watch it at your earliest convenience. I thought it was a really good show. Anyway, for today, we've got another special Rockets episode, but this one, the theme's going to be a little different. It's our Rockets over-unders for the 26 to 27 season, and we're obviously going to be weighing in on the current win total out in Las Vegas, which is 46.5 according to DraftKings, along with the implied placement in the Western Conference standings. But we're also going to expand on the concept a little bit and do our best guesses for the 9 obvious rotation players on this year's team and over-unders for their minutes per game. That part is a little more speculative. To my knowledge, there's no actual over-under line on how many minutes per game Steven Adams will play this season. So we'll save that for the back half of today's show, since a lot of that's going to be the two of us just having some fun. As far as that 46.5 over-under total from DraftKings, I'm using DraftKings because I believe in early September they're going to be available in all 50 states, so they're as official as it gets. And at face value...
Is this a hashtag ad?
They should be paying for the representation. But no, they've been all over the commercials here in the States advertising that I think September 2nd, they're going to be truly nationwide. And I'm also mentioning them because I believe they have a deal with the Rockets or with Tillman Fertitta in that if and when gambling gets fully legalized in Texas, there will be a DraftKings sportsbook connected to Toyota Center. That was a deal that got announced a few years ago. It's still not on the legal side able to happen yet, but if and when that ever happens, I think that will be an obvious partner for Tillman Fertitta and the Rockets. So I guess in the absence of us having a gambling sponsor, let's go with the closest thing the Rockets themselves have to a gambling sponsor. Anyway, that 46.5 total, it largely reflects the standings from last season. The 6 Western Conference teams that made the playoffs without having to go through the play-in tournament, the Spurs, the Thunder, the Rockets, the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Timberwolves, they're still the top 6. The Rockets finished 5th. The only change, the Timberwolves and Lakers flip-flopped. Minnesota now at 4, the Lakers now at 6. It was the reverse last season. Minnesota gets the offseason enthusiasm bump from the LaMelo Ball trade, and the Lakers get a slight decrease in their expected win total based on the losses, starting with LeBron James, but also including Rockets legend Marcus Smart. By and large, this time of year, the win totals are fairly conservative. They tend to be indexed to the last season standings unless there's some major offseason move that really juices the market in a way that, even though we're all bullish on the returns of guys like Steven Adams and Fred VanVleet and the signing of Marcus Smart, those aren't names, they're not box office names that really move the markets. So things tend to be indexed to the way last season finished, and especially with the Rockets going out in 6 games in the first round to a shorthanded Lakers squad. I understand why the Rockets aren't being projected to move higher in the Western Conference standings, even if we think maybe they should based on the guys they have coming back and the addition of Marcus Smart, especially in light of some of the losses the other teams around them have suffered. We'll get to momentarily. But that 46.5 over-under total, it feels low because the last 2 years the Rockets have been 52-30, and this past year's team had no Fred. It was without Steven for half a year. There was no Marcus Smart. So why would the Rockets potentially lose 5 or 6 wins? I don't think it's that Vegas hates the Rockets or is skeptical on the way they're going to perform. I mean, you can certainly argue that with Kevin Durant turning 38, maybe he declines a little bit. But as I've said before, I think that's largely offset by bumps you get from your young players continuing to get better. With the standings staying relatively static, I think what the over-under line reflects most is the NBA's draft lottery reform, in that because there's less of an incentive for the bad teams to truly bottom out and be awful, there are going to be fewer guaranteed wins across the league. There's going to be more parity. And so teams that were in the low 50s last season might be in the upper 40s this season. I'm personally not convinced that the change, at least in year one, is going to be that drastic, but I understand where the sentiment comes from. And with this being the first year and there not being any hard data that we can point to, people's minds are running wild and wondering what it could mean for the standings if the league achieves its objective, which is clearly to bring more parity and to avoid embarrassing games that are of no value. So because of that, I think the over-under totals are soft across the board, other than teams like the Spurs and Thunder, who are close to 60 wins because they look like juggernauts on paper. That sucks for the Rockets, but that's a different discussion for a different time. As far as the over-unders, I mean, I was reading ESPN's summer forecast today. They actually are more bullish on the Rockets. They have Houston at 51-31, tied with Denver for third in the West. The only two teams clearly ahead of them in the entire NBA are the Spurs and the Thunder. After that, the next two best records, the Knicks and Pistons tied for first in the East at 53-29. So I mentioned that context to say it's not just the Rockets whose win total looks a lot lower than you would expect, the over-under line, that is, relative to last season. You're seeing it in lines all across the league because people are paranoid of the lottery reform and what that's going to mean for the win totals. I still personally would bet on the Rockets to go over, but I bring up that context off the top to say it's not that Vegas is hating on the Rockets or that they're skeptical. It's more that this is a very unique time to be an NBA fan, and what we see next season, the landscape may overall be very different than the one we saw a few months ago. So, Paulo, I'll turn it over to you. With that context in mind, 46.5. Rockets went 52-30 the last 2 years. They should be a better team based on who they added this offseason. Are you going over or under?
So I'm a retired gambler, right? I don't gamble anymore. But I must admit, when I saw this number, I thought it was very tempting, because I think this is you smashed the over on this one. I know, and people are factoring in the fact that there's no incentive to tanking, so we won't get as many free wins. So you're gonna get some more upsets against the really, really bad teams. And I understand that, but 46.5 to me, even with that, I think the impact won't be as high as as people are expecting from the anti-tanking measures. I think teams won't be trying to tank; they'll just be organically bad. And far from the Rockets not being one of those teams that sometimes overlooks opponents, they definitely do. But I think 46.5 is just too low. For a team that is still very young and will still take the regular season seriously. I mean, even last season, where they weren't great and they were very inconsistent, they still got to 52 wins, I think you said. So yeah, I just don't think I'm sorry to be boring here, but this one just seems like a certain over. I'm not gonna knock on wood because obviously injuries can happen, but even if an injury does happen, I think even if God forbid KD gets hurt, I think this team still gets to 50 wins. I think they'll play a different type of basketball, but I do think that they'll still get there. So, yeah, just comfortably be over.
As far as the lottery reform, I think people might be overestimating its impacts, as you said, especially in year one. Like by year two, year three, by the time it can truly impact team building strategies, by that time, maybe the landscape changes in that you don't have as many teams doing a bottoming out model the way the Rockets did in their recent rebuild early in the 2020s. Like maybe that brings more parity across the board and that teams aren't building rosters with an intent to try and accumulate high draft picks. But for this coming season, teams didn't know what the model would be, this reform, until May. And we should mention it's a 3-year trial run. So who knows what it's going to look like beyond 2029, 2030, whenever it officially runs out. But as far as this coming season, we didn't know much about it and didn't have any specifics at all until late May. So there was only so much that could be done from a roster building perspective. So in terms of comparing this season to last season, I really don't think the landscape is going to be that different in terms of how teams were put together. It's just, you can have changes from a coach perspective and that the incentives are a little different. But I don't think that it radically changed anything from a GM perspective and team building because there simply hasn't been time for that to take effect. And then as far as, what it changes from a coaching perspective and just game by game incentives, it took away the incentive to lose big, to truly tank and be embarrassing and bottom out. But it also doesn't give teams a significantly greater incentive to win. I think that's what's being forgotten. There is the relegation zone, but that's only 3 spots. So we're talking a very small handful of teams who were already among the worst in the league to start with. So in my opinion, the likely outcome there, you're going to be ideally turning some of those 25, 30-point blowouts that are just embarrassing involving a team tanking. They're going to try a little bit harder. But because they're one of the worst teams in the league, they're still likely to lose. It's just hopefully going to be a more competitive game that puts on a better product for the NBA. A few of those will inevitably turn into wins, yes. But I think it's going to be relatively sparse. And once you get past that relegation zone, if you're not a playoff team, you're still going to be incentivized to go younger and evaluate players with more upside. But the types of players who have lower floors and in many cases, because they're young, aren't ready to help you win right away. You're still going to be incentivized to sell off veterans at the trade deadline and turn your focus to next season and the longer term blueprint. It's not like the playoffs expanded. There's less of an incentive to lose bad, but there's not more of an incentive to win, with the rare exception being teams that are truly in play for those 3 relegation zone spots. And those teams, they're so bad, I don't think they're going to win enough games no matter what to radically transform the standings. So with that in mind, we'll get to the Rockets specifically in a minute, but my view on this, there's just not as much meat on the bone for the standings to dramatically shift as what a lot of people seem to think based on these over-under lines. I don't see the standings changing to where you should subtract 4 to 6 wins based on what you would otherwise expect the team's record to be. That's how I characterize the system. Is that, Paulo, how you look at it?
Yeah, I think you made a really good point, right at the beginning of what you were saying about teams not having had the time to adjust their team building to the new lottery rules to the point that they've overhauled their entire team. Teams that were already bad and really young will continue to be bad and really young and continue to play really young players. And those teams most of the time lose because the young players just aren't good at winning. I don't think those early year 1, year 2 of the rebuild Rockets teams, well, year 1 maybe, the injuries made it tough to assess, but those really young teams, the first yellow and green generation, right, and then the draft class right after. I don't think those teams could have been better than what they were had they not have been trying to lose, right? I think they were just really bad, and I think that will continue to happen because teams will continue to stack young talent, because giving minutes to those guys will always outweigh whatever extra lottery odds that you may get, especially since they're flattened. But then at the same time, teams are not gonna be aiming to be just above the bottom three and just below top 10, because that's just a really tough thing to balance, and you're never going to build a team in the offseason trying to say, oh, we can't be too good, but we also can't be really, 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 really bad. So yeah, I think they're maybe still tanking in the last few games of the season from teams who may think that it's just not worth it to get into the play-in. Teams maybe like the Bulls of the past or the Kings. Like, if the Kings are in a position to make the play-in, will they actually try to make the play-in? It's probably better for them to miss out since they don't have a blue chip prospect. So yeah, I just don't think that the impact would ever be 5 or 6 wins, which is what the over-unders are implying, quite basically across the board.
Yeah, and I'm definitely over as well. I think beyond the records the last 2 years, you look at the metrics from last season. This was a 56 or 57 win team. They just lost a disproportionate amount of really close games, in large part because of turnovers, because they didn't have the steady hand of someone like Fred VanVleet. And now he's going to be back. You also added Marcus Smart, another veteran who is trustworthy with the ball and with his decisions. Amen Thompson and Reed Shepard should be better with the year of on-ball development they got last season. So this was a better than 52-win team by all the metrics, and they've addressed probably their biggest deficiency in terms of why they fell short of those metrics. So even if, in the Rockets' case, there is a reason to think that they're disproportionately harmed by the lottery reform, which I don't personally believe that they are, I think they have a bigger buffer than what Vegas is giving them credit for. And then you mentioned the games at the end of the season. We didn't do a schedule reaction show because by and large, the schedule is what it is. It's just about the ordering. Well, the one bit of analysis I do have, the Rockets' last 4 games, Bulls, Kings, Blazers, and Grizzlies, all at home. So the Rockets do have the benefit of teams that are likely going to be out of the playoff mix. The Rockets are going to be able to make up ground late. And they also, one of the only parts of the schedule that's different, each team has a few matchups a season from their own conference that they play only 3 times instead of 4. For the Rockets, they only play the Thunder and Nuggets 3 times, and they only go to Oklahoma City and Denver once each. That's an advantage when it comes to the scheduling draw. Now, there are potentially 2 add-on games if the Rockets don't advance in the NBA Cup, although I think they have a favorable group, Rockets and Nuggets at the top of their Cup group, and the Nuggets, to me, look like a pretty favorable matchup for the Rockets, and got an aging supporting cast. Peyton Watson just left. So I like what the Rockets can do in their Cup group, but if they don't advance, Denver probably will. You have to think the Thunder will be advantaged in their group. So if the Rockets don't advance in Cup play, the add-on opponents probably aren't going to be the Thunder and the Nuggets. So you'll get a weaker draw for those add-on games. And if you do advance in Cup play and you get to the 8-team knockout round, then to me that's a bonus. You gladly cross that bridge when you come to it. And point is, Rockets got a pretty good draw, limiting their exposure on the road to Oklahoma City and Denver. Difficult teams to play. They got a good close to the year. So if you need any other reason to think that they're going to go over, I think that should put you over the top, barring, major injuries, but that can be said for literally any team in the NBA. The other part of the over-under discussion that goes hand in hand with the win total is placement in the Western Conference standings. I mentioned earlier that right now it's fairly static compared to last season. you have the Lakers and Timberwolves flip-flopped, but otherwise the 6 solid playoff teams are the same and basically the same order. For purposes of this discussion, I'm going to set the over-under for the Rockets seed at 4.5. It's technically 5 based on DraftKings. ESPN had them tied with the Nuggets for the 3 and 4 spots. So let's split the difference. Let's say 4.5. I'm still going to go over. I think when you compare them to the 3 teams that they were very close with in the standings last season, the Lakers won 54. I believe the Nuggets won, or no, the Nuggets won 54. The Lakers won 53. Rockets 52. Timberwolves a little below that. The Lakers clearly got worse. The Nuggets a little bit worse. And the Timberwolves, I think their improvement is more about the playoffs than the regular season. I think there are going to be some growing pains with LaMelo Ball. And there's also a lot of playmaking reps to soak up when you take away not just Naz Reid, but also Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, who was lost for the season with the Achilles injury he suffered in the playoffs. That's 3 good rotation players that you're taking off last season's team. And even if LaMelo hits, I think it's more about the playoff upside that the LaMelo and Anthony Edwards pairing gives you. It's not about maximizing wins from the outset in the regular season. So I personally think that, those are 4 teams that were very close all of last season. I think the Rockets got better clearly this offseason when you factor in who they added and who they have coming back. Me personally, Paulo, I'm expecting the Rockets to be the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. I think they are the 3rd best team on paper. I think they're being slept on a little bit, similar to, I was thinking about this. It reminds me a lot of the team 10 years ago when the Rockets were coming off that 41-41 season midway through the Harden era. Dwight Howard was on his way out and everything went wrong the previous year. The chemistry went awry. There wasn't a lot of buzz. But then the closer you got to training camp and people started looking at, how the pieces fit together, the culture, once folks took a deeper look, people realized that team, it was better than the initial buzz would suggest. And I think it's going to be fairly similar with this season's group in that, there wasn't that splash off-season acquisition the way the Timberwolves had with LaMelo Ball that draws a lot of attention in July and August. But as you get to September and October and you see these guys in training camp, you hear them talk, you start to see the product on the floor in preseason. My guess is that the over-under line moves up a little bit for the Rockets as we get closer to the season starting in mid to late October. So because of that, I'm going over on the seed as well. How do you feel like the Rockets stack up relative to, those 3 through 6 teams and anybody else in the Western Conference if you see someone out there that might be in consideration to jump up this season?
This is actually going to be a really boring pod. I'm gonna go under. So, well, it would be under, right? For under 4.5.
No, we're going
means
over.
No,
over means optimistic.
Okay, then I'm going over. And I think it might be 4th. I actually disagree with your take on the LaMelo Ball impact. I'm actually not bullish on LaMelo Ball to the Wolves at all, but I do think that will be more of a problem in the playoffs than it will be during the regular season. During the regular season, I think it will have a little bit of a James Harden or Russell Westbrook effect in the sense that they'll basically always have one of them. Even if one is hurt, they'll likely have the other one. Even though LaMelo has his injury issues, I do think that they'll probably have one or the other for all 82 or 80 of 82 games or something of the sort. And I think LaMelo with the surrounding cast can, increase the floor of that team. And I think for the other games, obviously, so I think they'll be a better regular season team than they'll be a playoff team. I think once the playoffs come around, it will be a little bit more of your turn, my turn, and then LaMelo is obviously a very poor defender. He's not more efficient scoring than Anthony Edwards is, so why have the ball in his hands at all? In a playoff setting when you're going possession by possession. So I do think that they could be 3rd in the West. Other than that, I think we should be better than the Lakers. I just don't buy the Lakers' current team building. I know Luka and Daniel Gafford is enough to get you to 50 wins. But then again, I think the Rockets will be better than 50 wins. And I think Daniel Gafford's a bit more athletic than Walker Kessler is, and there's really not much else on that Lakers team. The defense is still going to be horrid. Walker Kessler is going to have to do a lot to cover that up. So I don't think the Lakers will be better. I think the Jazz have a chance. I think the Jazz are the only other team in the West that I give a realistic shot at being good. I don't think the Mavericks are ready. I don't think the Warriors are gonna, turn back the clock.
Did you
The
mention the
Clippers are
Nuggets?
obvious. Oh, I forgot the Nuggets, but still, the Nuggets. I'm not bullish on the Nuggets either. After what happened with Peyton Watson, they're just not deep enough, and they're one injury away to one of their big three from just being, a 6-7 seed, unless maybe Cam Johnson has a bounce back year. Maybe DeMar DeRozan turns back the clock, but I feel like they are at the Bucks post title stage of their build, where you're just kind of grasping at straws, trying to convince yourself this is a real contender. And Jokic is maybe the best player in the world, but there's only so much he can do. I don't. We've always matched up well against the Nuggets in the past with this team construct, so I think that will continue to be the case. So I think 4 is about right. If you've given me 3.5, I'd probably go under. Giving me 4.5, I'll take the over.
The one team outside of the top 6 that I fear a little bit, not necessarily day one, but just because of the upward mobility, is Golden State. Simply because as you get closer to the trade deadline, that $56 million expiring Jimmy Butler contract, once it's 2/3 paid off, that's going to be something that, if a big name comes available on the market, could potentially get Golden State a piece to put around Steph Curry and Draymond Green. There's already the talk that's out there about, are they wasting the end of Steph Curry's glorious career? Well, if Steph is having a great year, and between Steph and Draymond, they're just relevant enough to be at 500 or a little bit above, I could see, as you get closer to late January, early February, ironically, the same circumstances that led them to trade for Jimmy Butler 2 years ago, which made them, I think, even though they were a 7 seed, they finished with 48 or 49 wins. Point is, they were up there. And that's, unfortunately, when the Rockets drew them in the 2-7. And Jimmy Butler made them a better playoff team than they were for most of the season. I could see that happening again, ironically, using Butler as the outgoing salary to bring in someone who's more ready to play at a high level this season, or who knows, maybe Butler comes back from the ACL midseason and is able to quickly get back to who he was before the injury. That's a possibility as well. But I just feel like if Golden State has relatively good health and hangs around near 500, they're going to have pressure to make a big move to maximize what's left of Steph's prime. I don't know if it'll be in their long-term best interest, but it might give them a chance to, get closer to whoever's at the back of that 3 through 6 range. I don't think it'll be the Rockets. I think we both agree they'll be at 3 or 4, and we hope higher than that. But I mean, as far as chasing down the Spurs or the Thunder, we can have a conversation about that once the season gets going and we have a better understanding of what the gap is. But even if the Warriors do jump up, I don't see them as a realistic candidate to surge past the Rockets. That's more just the one team I could see outside of the top 6. I guess, Paulo, yours is Utah, it sounds like, if somebody outside the top 6 for the way it's currently set up jumps up.
Yeah, I think they have the talent. I think they have a good coach in Will Hardy from the Ime Udoka tree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if someone makes a jump, I think it's them.
And yeah, just to put a bow on the official over-unders before we move on to individual players with some more quick-hitting fun takes, I really think a few minutes ago I referenced the 10 years ago parallel. This offseason reminds me so much of that because of the perception externally that the chemistry is bad based on certain events both on and off the court last season. We know what they were. We don't need to rehash that. And then the players that were brought in the offseason, or in this case, brought back 10 years ago, Ryan Anderson and Eric Gordon, those weren't sexy signings. The Rockets didn't make blockbuster moves. I think that's when they brought in Nene as well. But as you got closer to the preseason, the start of the regular season, and folks saw how it all meshed on the court, once folks took a deeper look at the situation, the optimism grew, and next thing you know, the Rockets won 55 games, and they're clearly in the top 3 of the West. I could see something very similar this year in that names like LaMelo Ball are going to draw attention in the offseason. Names like Fred VanVleet, Steven Adams, Marcus Smart aren't. But as you get closer to games actually being played, and especially once we get to the preseason and we get through the first couple of weeks of the regular season, the Rockets should also have the advantage of more continuity this year 2 with Kevin Durant. That's where you'll see folks around the league, including the betting community, take the Rockets a little bit more seriously. I think right now they're just largely dealing with the stench of how last season ended, and the moves they made this offseason, while solid, none of them were so transformative, so buzzworthy that it erases that stench. They're going to have to get closer to actual basketball to start erasing that. Anyway, let's move on to the guys who are going to play and the guys who are, we hope, going to change that perception, and that's the top 9. We expect the 5 starters, assuming health, will be Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., and the returning Fred VanVleet. Then off the bench, Reed Sheppard, Tari Eason, Steven Adams, and Marcus Smart. There will certainly be other players beyond those 9 who play, but in terms of who and how much, we can talk about that later once specifics become clear. For now, I want to focus on the 9 that we know, no matter what, assuming health, are going to be out there. And in the spirit of over-unders, we're going to trade off names and say, player A, 35.5, over-under. Paulo, you'll respond. You'll give a few reasons why. You'll then pick the next player, and we'll trade off until we finish, hopefully fairly soon, because I know our first couple of segments went on a little bit longer than I intended. And then one final disclaimer before we start rolling off the names. If this was a 1-game scenario, you would be limited to 240 minutes because there's 5 spots on the floor, and assuming there's no overtime, 48 minutes for each of them. So 48 times 5 is 240. We're going to be a little bit above 240 because injuries do happen no matter what. Steven Adams last year averaged almost 23 minutes per game, but he missed half the season due to injury. So the half, or more than half, it was actually 50 games that he missed, in which his rotation minutes went to other players. So even though Steven Adams on paper averaged 23 minutes per game because he was only out there for 30 games or whatever it was, there were a lot of minutes. And so when we talk about the average total on a per game basis, because of injuries, because of back-to-back maintenance and those types of considerations, you're going to be above 240. And there's also going to be some overtimes, as we mentioned. So no matter what, we're not going to be limited to 240, even though in a 1-game scenario, Ime Udoka would be. So, as far as specific players, I'll begin with Kevin Durant, and I'll let you respond, Paulo, and then you can pick the next guy. Kevin played 36.4 minutes per game last year. The Rockets have already expressed a desire to reduce those in this coming season. The reasons should be obvious. He turns 38 years old in late September. He also broke down late last season. You can't prove that it was related to the minutes per game and the overall games that he played. I think, 78 of 82? But you can't prove that it wasn't that either that led to the 2 injuries that happened leading into the playoffs and then during the playoffs. So between his age, it could be a contract year. He has a player option next summer. And just trying to load manage to get the best version of Kevin Durant in the playoffs, which you most certainly did not have this past season, I'm going to say it's less than 36.4 because playing him more minutes per game would just be terrible roster management. But at the same time, because the Rockets don't have another top shelf half-court scorer, they do rely on Kevin a lot, especially in high leverage moments. So it's tough for me to see a dramatic decrease as well. So they want to get below 36.4. Maybe they give him some back-to-backs off. But I'm going to set the over-under at 35.5.
Wow, I thought you were going 35, and I was gonna take the over. I am still going to take the over,
Okay.
I think. But this is not something I would bet on. It's not something I feel confident about. Because I think ultimately, it will be under if the season goes perfectly according to plan. We're breezing and we have the ability to load manage him. This never happens. It's the Rockets. It's Houston sports. Somebody's gonna get hurt. Some catastrophe or some, thing is gonna happen to the team. We're gonna have to play him more. Ime Udoka has the history of preferring to play guys too many minutes rather than give away a win. And I don't think we are veteran enough to be in, I don't know, maybe Warriors mode in which they knew they were going to make the playoffs anyway and they were fine losing some games because they knew they had that extra gear. The Rockets have not proven they have an extra gear, so seeding does matter for them. So I think he'll play more than 35 and a half. Now, I'm gonna switch to I'm gonna go with Man Thompson. Let's go with the biggest players first.
He was
Now,
37.4 last year.
yeah, he was at 37.4 last season, but this is an interesting one because he was at 32 the season before where he played the majority of the minutes at small forward, but he was in and out of the starting lineup, so that's deflated a little bit. Last season he played point guard, and this season Fred's back, so he's not going to be forced into as many guard minutes. Now he is the guy that Ime Udoka trusts the most, I think, on this team by far. So even at small forward, he's going to play a lot. I'm going to set the over under at 37.5, which is what he was last season. And I'm going to take the under because I think even though he's, someone Ime Udoka trusts the most and he's really important for this team, and he has the ability to play 41 minutes a night for a week straight and be fine. I do think that positionally they have enough resources or more resources of guys that they will want to play. And when it comes to late game situations, he's gonna play anyway. But he might be subbed back in the fourth quarter a little bit later because Fred's there. And they can afford to. I just think it's too much pushing the other direction for me to go the over. Although I'm very confident that he'll have plenty. I think he'll have the most 40-minute played games this season for any team. But I do think that the over-under will be lower because in games in which the Rockets don't necessarily need them to play 40 minutes, there are more bodies to absorb the point guard minutes. And so that will lead to him naturally playing less in games that are blowouts, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go the other way on Kevin to close the loop on that. I'll go under 35.5. I don't think it'll be by much, but I do think they learned some difficult lessons last season. Amen. Boy, I wanted to go over because it can't be overstated how valuable he is to the team. And his body is in phenomenal shape, so he can handle almost anything you throw at him. But boy, you said 37.5?
Yep.
I think it's got to be a tick under. I think 36.5, 37. That's about the most I would go because his style of play, the defense he plays, what you want to see him doing, attacking the rim on offense, he's had some cramping issues. It's very taxing. It's very demanding physically to get the best version out of him and to make sure that he can be special in the playoffs. I want to say over because he's that important to the team on both ends, but if it's 37.5, and I see why you said it there because they were at 37.4 last year, yeah, I'll go a tick under as well. All right, next man up, Alperen Sengun, 33.3 last year. I'm going to set the over-under at 33. Even though he's an all-star, we should note Steven Adams is coming back, and he missed more than half of last season due to injury. They can run double big, but I'm not sure, at least in the regular season, just how frequently you want to do it. So 33.3 was the number last year. I'm going to start at 33. Would you go over or under that?
I'm gonna go under.
Hmm.
I think with Steven, that would be, he played 33.3 last season. That was the most in his career. The year before he played 30. The year before he played 32. I just think it will depend on health, but I think this season, considering health and considering that they still have Capella who can still play some minutes, so like he won't be overplayed in emergency situations, or he won't be there filling minutes later in games and blowouts in a way that he sometimes was this season. I think he's also someone who Ime sometimes pulls because of defensive issues, and that will have an impact as well. And I think Udoka will have a realistic way of going small ball more so this season than last season because now Jabari will be freed up to play the 5-some if needed. Steven Adams is still there. Clint Capella is still there. I think it will be under 33 because it has been that way basically his entire career, and this is a return to normal. And I think last season he was playing too much, considering that he is still at 33, even when he's pulled back from certain games because of defensive issues.
Yeah, that's fair. I look back to his previous years. Yeah, 31 and a half first year of Ime Udoka, and the defensive slippage was real. We've talked about it a lot this offseason and really going back to last season. So perhaps there's something to be said for get those minutes down closer to 30 and you can get a better version of him defensively as well, or at least one that can last longer into the season before there's any slippage. So yeah, I'll go under as well. Just feel like he got it started at 33 because he's an all-star and he was at 33.3 last season. Who's your next guy, Paulo?
Yeah. So I'm gonna skip Jabari and I'm gonna go right ahead onto the one that's more interesting to me, which is Reed Shepard. And I think this is probably the most interesting one of the entire set.
Yep.
He was at 26.2 last season, which is higher than a lot of people would have guessed. And people want him to get a lot more minutes than he did last season. Marcus Smart's here. Amen Thompson's still here. Fred VanVleet's back. In terms of using him as a 2, as a sharpshooter type, now they have Bogdanovic as well. Which, he's not going to be competing with minutes or 4 minutes with Reed. But situationally, he will get some minutes that otherwise Reed would have gotten. So I'm unsure if I should set this higher than what it was last season because of all of the stuff that we thought he's supposedly put on weight, and everybody seems to agree that they should play him more, and there's pressure that way. Not that I believe that Ime Udoka will listen to that; he'll just do whatever he thinks. I'm gonna set it at 27, which is 1 minute higher than last season. I actually want to look up if his minutes were scaled up as the season went along.
They were. I know for a fact. From the All-Star break through the end of the playoffs, he was actually at 30 minutes per game.
Yeah, okay. Then I'm gonna set a different over/under because I didn't have that in mind. I'm gonna jump it to 29.
Ooh.
Well, 28 and a half. Because it doesn't make sense to have an over/under at the round number, right?
Yeah.
So I'll go 28 and a half, which would be a 2-minute increase, considering that he started the season playing less minutes. Considering that, after this season they go into an extension, he's eligible for extension, so they have to know. And considering that if the season doesn't go well, I think they will have to retool, and knowing what they have with him is important. And considering the fact that they may want to save minutes from Fred VanVleet early on in the season, but I'm gonna go under because I think despite all of that, I think ultimately Ime Udoka will just do, unless there's an outlier defensive improvement, he'll just have games where he breaks down defensively, and Ime Udoka is going to have the tools to not play him, even more so than he had last season. And given that chance, I think he will. Whether that is playing Marcus Smart in that role, whether that is shifting a man to that role, whether that is playing one of the point guards and putting Bogdanovic in that spot, I just think Ime Udoka will just be too taxing on defensive breakdowns, given that he now has more choices than he did last season. assuming health, of course. So I think I'm gonna go under, but I was going to go under at 27 as well.
Ooh.
Or 26.5, which is what I would have ended up setting it at. But your reaction made me think that I might be off base, and so I decided to jump it up a little bit. So please tell me
Yeah,
both if you were going to already take the under, if you took take the under, or if that changed your mind.
it did change my mind. I'm going to go under with the bump. I was prepared to go over because I feel like people, at least on my timeline, are overreacting to the return of Fred and the addition of Marcus. As mentioned, Marcus is as much of a replacement for the Dylan Brooks role as anything. There's certainly some added insurance that he can handle the ball, but that's not the primary reason that they brought him in. I do think Reed is viewed as a priority. He played increasingly more last season, earned more of Ime's trust, even if fans on social media don't want to believe it for whatever reason. So if you had set it at 26 or 27, I was going to go over, but 28 and a half, that's too aggressive. He might come close because I think with Fred, I don't know if they'll necessarily limit the minutes a ton. Like I don't think they'll play him like 35 minutes a game, at least not right away, and hopefully not at all, given the other bodies that are in this rotation. This looks like a very good team to me. So I don't think they need to play Fred at 35 minutes per game again, even if he was available to do that. But I also don't think it serves Fred any good to play him like 15 minutes per game. I think, if Fred plays, he's likely to start and play, at least 25 or so minutes per game. I guess I'll get to him next since we're already talking about him. I think the maintenance that Fred gets is more likely to be on night 2 of back-to-backs or on half of back-to-backs. And so if Fred is out altogether, those are games where the Rockets are more likely to turn Reed loose and perhaps Marcus Smart to an extent as well. And so that might inflate those minutes totals a little bit. But 28 and a half, it's too rich for my blood. If it was 26 or 27, I was going to go over, but I would love to go over because honestly, if he exceeds 28 and a half, it means he's having a breakout season and he looks like a stud, but I'll believe that when I see it. Swole Reed, if
Or
you
that the
will.
entire team got hurt.
Well, that too, but let's be optimistic. Come on, it's dog days. Anyway, I'm under on Reed. You are as well, but it's not for a pessimistic reason. You just set the line so high that I can't possibly justify going over it. Now, let's move on to that other guy, which is Fred VanVleet. He was at 35 2 years ago, which was down from his first year with Ime Udoka. I think it's clearly going to be down this season relative to 35, first year coming off an ACL. But they're not going to bring him back to play 15 minutes a game either. Like, he believes he is still a very good NBA player. There are guys who have come back from an ACL and been close to who they were before. He's just 32 years old. It's a contract year, so he's going to be very incentivized to go out and have a strong season if he can. He definitely contributes to winning. I don't think it serves him any good to play a role that's not one that truly extrapolates. If it's not full-blown starters minutes, it's at least something close to that, especially since he's 12 plus or will be 12 plus months removed from the ACL surgery by the time the season starts in October. We're not talking about bringing him back at the 9 or 10 month mark, and so you're trying to ease him in. No, he should be fully cleared. So with Fred, I'll set the over-under at 28. I need to think about that a little bit. Paulo, what's your read on 28 over-under for Fred?
Wow, I was thinking you were gonna set it at like 30.
Ooh, you're going
That
over?
actually is very interesting because damn, because I'm not as optimistic on Fred being, really good coming back. And I do think that it will obviously take a dip because I don't think he's going to start playing all of the minutes that he can play right away. Damn, 28? But 28 seems so low. But at the same time, it does make sense as a pass the baton season if man's going to be playing what a point, if Marcus Smart's there, if Rich Shepard's there. Damn, 28 is really hard. I'm going to go over with the 28.
Hmm.
I have to go over with the 28 because I think if he's anywhere close, he's just someone who he may trust and he is going to play him. And it's hard to imagine a guy that's been an Iron Man in his entire career. No, guy that's played I think 38 minutes per game at certain points in his career. Let me go back and check that actually.
He was at
Um,
37 his first season in Houston, and that dipped to 35. By the way, I'll save some time. I'm over as well. I think it'll be close, but people shouldn't forget the last time we saw the Rockets with Fred in the playoffs, he was their best player in the playoffs. So they want to give themselves a shot next spring with Fred being truly back. And so with that in mind, like they're not going to turn him loose and say it's like the injury never happened, but I don't see like extreme minutes limits to like 15, 20 minutes per game making a lot of sense. I think if he's available, he's going to play. And what maintenance there will be absences altogether, like sitting half of back to backs, which would not surprise me at all. So if he sits on back to backs, those zeros obviously don't contribute to the minutes per game average. So taking into account those being the maintenance games, taking into account the Rockets want him to be a starting level option in the playoffs. Fred wants to put up numbers because he's betting on himself. They did not extend the contract. This is a year in which he's playing for his next deal and proving that he's back as a starting level guard in the NBA. I think he's slightly ahead of 28 when all is said and done, even though I think he's probably a smidge below it to start the year for the obvious reason.
okay, so I'm picking next. I'm gonna go for the next most interesting one. I guess Marcus Smart could be it, but that's not who I'm picking. I'm gonna go Tari Eason,
Okay.
and I'm gonna set the over under at 28. He's played 25 two seasons ago, 26 or 25.8 last season. I think last season he was just playing poorly for most of the year. And so I think this season extensions ironed out. He's stable. I think the stuff with his personal life seems to be stable. And I just think he's just a really big contributor for this team. And I think he's going to go back to his production and the impact that he had a couple of seasons back, but without the injury issues that he had a couple of seasons back. And so I think he's likely like the sixth man of this team. So I think he gets over 28 minutes a game unless he has a shooting slump or something like that. Because I don't think the effort or or the rebounding or all the stuff that or even the better decision making that he had a couple seasons back compared to last season, with less iso ball and stuff like that. I think he's a smart player. I think the defense is coming back. I think the rebounding is coming back. I think the only thing that could hurt him if he struggles from three. We'll see how that goes, but I do think he's going to play more than 28 when it's all said and done for the season. And I know that's an aggressive jump, but I was prepared for the hot take, and so I had to give a number under that allowed me for hot take. I don't know where you're going.
I'm going under, not because I'm down on Tari as a player, but I just feel like the arrival of Marcus Smart into that Dylan Brooks role, it provides a level of insurance for those forward/wing minutes that simply wasn't there a year ago. Like if you go back to that 52 and 30, the first 52 and 30 team of Ime Udoka, Jabari actually came off the bench in the second half of that season once Amen was promoted to the starting lineup because Dylan was so valuable to that team they couldn't take him out. I'm not saying that I think Marcus Smart is going to start. Certainly Dylan Brooks is a better perimeter shooter and it's not a total apples to apples, but in terms of the toughness, the defensive versatility, there are a lot of similar traits there. And so if you think Marcus Smart is going to play a respectable amount of minutes, to me, it's guys like Tari and Jabari that are a little bit at risk. Not because they're necessarily doing anything wrong, but it's a high level of competition. Tari was at 26 last year, and I think, last season with the injuries, Jabari obviously had his shooting slump in January. Tari, we know what happened after the All-Star break. With Marcus Smart around, I think they'll each have a little bit less of a leash this season. I think conventional wisdom is that, Marcus Smart will make it tougher to play Reed Shepherd the minutes that fans expect. I actually think it's more likely that Marcus Smart could make it tougher for Tari and Jabari to get to, not saying they're not going to play, but get to the minutes totals that we've become accustomed to. Now, to your point, if Tari is good enough, and from everything I've heard, he's had a great offseason, he's put the contractual talks behind him. If he goes out and has a great season, then I think they'll err on the side of youth, and he's also longer. Like, I hope Tari goes out there and proves that he is a 30 minutes per game player. And in that scenario, the Rockets will say, look, we invested $6.5 million a year in Marcus Smart. That's very small potatoes in today's NBA. So the tiebreaker would definitely go to Tari. They have more invested in him long term. But I don't know. At 28, that's a high total. That's more than 2 minutes up from last season. I'm going to go under because I think Marcus Smart, in the exercises that I've seen, people have him at something similar to Steven Adams, who played just under 23 per game last season. Marcus played 28.5 last year with the Lakers, but that's a total apples to oranges given the situation, and Lakers didn't have the depth that the Rockets do in their top 9 of their rotation. I've seen most people expecting Marcus in the low to mid 20s for purposes of this exercise. I'm going to put his over under at 23.5. And spoiler, I'm going over. I think we saw in the playoffs, he's a winning player. He provides insurance at so many different spots for Fred and his ACL recovery, for Jabari and Tari for those stretches during the year that they go into slumps, with Reed and the uncertainty that's still there with him. Just the versatility of Marcus Smart as a ball handler and someone that can defend really all 5 positions on the court. And given his history with Ime Udoka, having won Defensive Player of the Year the last time he played with Ime in Boston, I know it feels like Marcus Smart is old, but he's just 32. I feel like he plays at least 24, maybe 25 plus minutes per game, even if going into the year, it feels like a lot of Rockets fans have him in that Steven Adams range. So I'm setting, actually, I said 23.5. I'll go, let's make it around 24. 24 over under for Marcus Smart. What's your pick there?
That's so funny because I was about to ask you how high would it go until you picked the under. I think he's gonna play bang on 24 minutes a night.
Oh, push!
But it's I can't push. That's a coward's way out. I think it's. I could see 23.8. I could see 24.2. I'm gonna go under actually. Okay. Because I think there's a decent chance that he's washed.
Oh, what the
I think
hell?
there's a chance that he's washed, and this is so close. Like, we're splitting hairs. That small chance that he's washed is gonna make me take the under just in case. I think it's more likely that he's washed than it is likely that he'll play more or that he'll be more of a option than Tyrese and Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson, Reed Shepherd, and Fred VanVleet, who I think is who he's competing against. So I think there's a not 0% chance that this is DFS 2.0. And just to cover my... Well, I know, but he was hurt for 3 seasons in a row.
Well, I know, but those were random injuries. I'm just saying there's no surgery that he had earlier in the offseason and an existing injury that we know of like there was with DFS.
True, but he's 6'3". I don't think washed necessarily means that he's a bad defensive player. I think it's just a step back defensively and not shooting well. And if he is, just a little worse defensively, or he's gambling more, or he's not as fast, or he doesn't fit the scheme, which I think he does as a point of attack guy, going to the screens. But I think there's a chance that he's just, 29% from 3. This is Houston we're talking about.
Fair enough.
He's 29% from
Chip
3.
England, though. Come on.
True, but I think if that's the case, if he takes a step back in any way, I think he's probably like an 18 minutes a night guy for some nights. Because the other guys are just more important. And even if stuff like if the season goes wrong and you're like kind of already knowing that you're gonna retool, he's not the guy you're gonna prioritize playing. So let's say I'm not saying that these outcomes are likely. I'm saying they are not 0%. And so when I was literally on the line at 24, that's what swayed me. Like the edge cases, I think there are more edge cases for it going wrong or really, really wrong than edge cases for it going amazingly well. Like I don't think that there's any chance that Marcus Smart comes in and averages, I don't know, let's say his 29-8 season. Well, he didn't play any games in this season. Well, let's call it his last Celtics season, where he averaged like 12, 3, and 6 with a steal and a half, like right after being DPOI, and shoots not 34, which is what he shot then, but shoots 36% from three. And if that's the case, he's gonna play like 30 minutes a night. So, so I think it's more likely that the other ones than it is that it goes that well that it bumps it over. So I'm gonna go under.
I can respect that. It's not that you're saying you're out on him. It's just playing out potential scenarios. And there are scenarios at his age and with his profile that maybe the fit just isn't right. And the Rockets did not objectively invest very much in him. So I can respect it. If we're playing the scenario game, then yes, there are worlds where it doesn't work out. Anyway, 2 guys left on the board. Take your pick.
Wait, who is there besides Jabari? Am I lost? Oh, it's Steven Adams. Oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
Steven Adams is so hard. I'm going to go with Jabari. I'm going to leave Steven to you. So Jabari played 35 minutes a game last season, which is wild. It's a 5-minute increase. I don't think it necessarily is because he impacted the game, he has to play 5 more minutes level, because that's a huge difference. I did think he got a lot better. Don't get me wrong. I thought Jabari had a great season, one of the best improvements on our team. But I'm going to set the over-under at 32, which is 2 more than the season prior. Yeah. Because I think there's just a lot of competition in his position, including at center if he plays some minutes there. And at 32 and a half. And at 32 and a half, I'm going to take the under. Still. Because, yeah, I think he's going to play like 32. So I set it at 32 and a half to see where you're at. Just because, unless there's an outlier, like the way he gets more minutes, is there's an outlier shooting development. Or he's just an insane help defender. In which case, KD plays the 3, he plays the 4 between him and Şengün, and he's, being an octopus on defense, I guess, in a Time Lord type role defensively. In those Celtics teams. I think that's the way he plays more than that. Other than that, I think there's just too much competition at all of these positions for him to play 35. Because 35 is a pretty insane number, and 35 is the type of number you get when a team's short-handed, not necessarily for a role player. And it's not like the Rockets are short on 3-and-D role guys. Now, if he's shooting 40% from 3, he might play 35, he might play 37. So yeah, but I'm gonna go the under at 32 and a half, and I think that may be a hot take, but assuming linear, progression, which is I think that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I would go under as well. Although if you set it at 32, that's right about where I expect him to be at. I would have had a tough time deciding. I might have taken the cop out of push, but if you're giving me 32 and a half, I'll take the under, because I just feel like it's Jabari and Tari. Those are the spots where when they go through slumps, that's where the addition of Marcus Smart is going to steal minutes here or there. It's like having Dylan Brooks back in a lot of ways. And we know that Jabari went to the bench to fit Dylan in that starting lineup 2 years ago. Again, not expecting that to happen this season, but I do think for a few minutes here or there, if it's a game where Jabari is cold from 3, maybe the perimeter matchup for him. We know there are some speedy guys that are tough for him to handle in terms of dribble penetration, denial. Marcus Smart is someone that you can put in and be better at that area of the game. So I think Jabari played a ton of minutes last year out of desperation because of the injuries. And to Jabari's credit, he played very well. And from everything I've heard, he's had a great summer. But I just feel like with a more complete team, his ideal minutes total is around the same as Şengün, closer to low 30s than mid 30s. And I think at least over the balance of the season, that's where the superior depth could take a little bit of a toll. Playoffs might be a different story. All right, last guy on the board, Steven Adams, 22.8 last year. He is coming off ankle surgery, which cost him the last 50 games or so of the season. So coming off ankle surgery, I'll decrease his minutes a little bit, but not too much, because similar to Fred VanVleet, I don't think it makes sense to play him just like 10, 12 minutes per game. I think in terms of maintenance, you would give him games off altogether, like half of back-to-back. So I think superior depth coming off an injury, a little bit of a decrease is realistic, but I don't think it's going to be anything drastic like going down to 12 to 15 minutes per game. So I'm going to take that 22.8 and put it at 20.5. Are you going over or under?
Damn, I think you're reading my mind. I wouldn't, so not necessarily that I have a specific number in mind, but more so that, so I was thinking I was likely going to take the under on whatever you said, because I think that they are going to manage him to make sure they have him for the postseason. But at the same time, I was thinking, well, doing that, they might just sit him out of a bunch of games instead of decreasing his minutes. So I do think that when he plays, he's going to play a bunch, and then he's just going to rest. So I'm gonna go over. I think he plays 22 minutes around that again this season. Then, although coming off of the injury he had, the first few games he might play less minutes, like he did in year one in Houston. But I'm gonna go over anyway.
Yeah.
I just think that eventually he's gonna be playing big minutes, and I think whatever he plays little in the first 2 months of the season, it's going to be compensated by him playing a lot going into the playoffs, because I think they plan on playing him a lot in the playoffs. So I think they'll kind of get him up to speed at the end of the season by playing him a bunch.
I'll close out with a little bit of intel, because the intel will perhaps explain why I'm leaning under, not significantly under, but under nonetheless. So the two injured guys, or injured last season, Fred and Steven, I've checked in throughout the offseason to make sure everything is on course, and from everything I've been told, it is. Both should be fully available when training camp starts in late September. But the concerns with the two of those guys, and let's be real, anytime you're coming off season-ending surgery, you can't assume that they're going to automatically be exactly who they were before the injury. You can hope, but there's always some risk, especially with guys in their 30s. And with those two guys, it's, even though they each had season-ending leg surgery, they're very different injuries. Fred's injury is far more significant in terms of the medical outlook, in that an ACL tear is much more significant than, I know it was ankle surgery, but basically it was an ankle sprain. It was just a severe one, grade 3, that involved more tearing. In terms of the medical side, Steven Adams, his return timetable was a lot quicker for a reason. And it sounds fairly similar to what Carlos Correa has been doing with the Astros, and sounds like he'll beat the expected return timeline by a couple of months. I know he's older and a big guy, and, the demands of playing at his size shouldn't go unnoticed. But strictly in terms of the medicals, Fred has much more to prove as a small guard who needs burst coming off a torn ACL, which, people made a huge deal out of his knee explosion comments on a podcast. I mean, it is like a knee exploding. That's what it feels like. That's what it is like. It's a very significant injury. So with Fred, in terms of exactly how much burst he has, how close to 100% is he? That's a little more of an open question. That's, I guess, the bull case for Steven. The bear case is that by comparison, I think Fred is much more of a feel player. So even if Fred isn't close to 100% at the start of the year, so much of his game is based on how he manages the court, how he communicates, how he handles the ball, how he makes a high percentage of open shots, that even if he's 80, 90%, and I'm not saying I've heard that, but just making some reasonable assumptions coming off of ACL surgery, Fred is such a high feel player that he will still provide, or should provide, in my opinion, a significant amount of value. With Steven, I think he'll be closer to 100% because the injury wasn't as significant, but he's not as much of a feel guy. And so it wouldn't surprise me, and I've heard there's concerns would be too strong, but there's people inside the building that noticed his first season with the Rockets coming off that year he missed with knee surgery, and it took him until February and March to really get going. And some of it was building up the leg, but a lot of it was just rust. Like, his style of play, I know he's a very large human being, but to crash the offensive glass the way he does and set the right screens, mentally he has to be very sharp. It's not like he's an explosive guy at all. So he was very rusty a lot of that 24 to 25 season, and it took until after the All-Star break, really, before we saw anything close to the peak Steven Adams, and then it certainly carried over into last season until he suffered the season-ending injury in January. It wouldn't surprise me if mentally Steven has more rust to shake off than Fred, simply based on the nature of his play. He's not quite as cerebral as Fred is in terms of his feel for the game. And so if he's rusty, that might decrease his minutes a little bit towards the beginning stages of the season. I think he'll get it back the same way he did 2 years ago. And as I've made the case for in recent shows, I think by the playoffs, he'll be one of your most important players. But for the season overall, if he was at 23 minutes per game with everything right, as it was for him last year prior to the ankle injury, it wouldn't shock me if it goes 3 or 4 minutes below that, coming off the layoff and knowing that 2 years ago, it did take him a little bit of time to get up to speed and adjust back to, that's part of it as well. The speed of the NBA game for a guy of his size and physicality, it takes some time. And especially in his 30s, he's not the most fleet of foot. So with Fred, he's had to overcome certain limitations his whole career. And so much of his game is based around IQ that I feel like from the start, he'll provide value in those areas. With Steven, there is recent history showing this, and it takes him a little bit of time. So because of that, I'm going to go under, even though I do think by the playoffs, he will certainly be well above that over-under line. Anyway, with that, we'll put a bow on this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this over-under themed episode. I think as we get into September, we'll get back to, breaking news that the Rockets finalized their roster for camp. We'll see if any other transactions happen in that window. We've talked about in the past that it takes until the start of training camp to pressure some teams to make moves based on potentially the awkwardness of bringing in certain guys to camp. Well, maybe that presents some opportunities for the Rockets. We'll have to wait and see. Regardless, as we get into September, we'll have more regular shows. I think this will probably be the last of our special themed episodes. Maybe we'll squeeze in an interview before camp. But then once training camp opens, and it's going to be early for the Rockets because they have that trip to China in the preseason, the Rockets will open up camp, I want to say, around the 22nd, 23rd of September, definitely earlier by about a week than they typically do. Usually it's right around the 29th or 30th, just before October. It'll be about a week before that this year because of the China trip and the associated travel. So we'll talk more basketball at that time, and we'll certainly have more activity to react to. Now, this is sort of our downtime. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll get back to more regular episodes in the near future. If you want to hear from me or Paulo in the interim, we are talking Astros, we are talking Texans. You can find us on social media. Paulo's at Paulo Alves NBA, and I'm at Ben DuBose. And the show, the Rockets Launch Pod, if you hit up the X page for it, LaunchPod 790, and you go to Linktree in the bio, that's got all the links you need to support the show. Friends, partners, sponsors, Clutch Fans, USA Today's Rockets Wire, Clutch Fans YouTube channel, and then our individual distributors, Apple, YouTube, Spotify. All the links you need to support this program you can get by hitting up that Linktree at LaunchPod 790. All right, with those plugs complete, we're done. On behalf of Paulo, Alves, I'm Ben DuBose. As always, we appreciate you guys and girls so much for listening, and please come back soon for more new episodes of the Rockets Launch Pod. Go Rockets.